The morning light filtered through the blinds as I made tea in the kitchen. The house was quiet, Fielding, and Una were still asleep. These moments of solitude were the most precious to me. I moved silently around the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone, though my internal alarm clock raised me at the same time, regardless of weekends or holidays. 30 years of working at the El Cajon post office had done its job. My body was used to getting up at 5 in the morning. My gaze lingered on the calendar 17 days until retirement. I sighed. Age was making itself felt with aching pain in my joints, but the thought that I would soon cease to be useful weighed more heavily on me. My name is Irene Lockwood, 67 years old, and for the past 2 years I've been living in the home of my grandson Fielding and his wife, Una. After the death of Hamish, my husband, with whom we shared 42 years, I could not stay in our old home. Too many memories, too much emptiness. When Fielding offered to move in with them, I said yes. I thought I would help the young people and not feel so lonely at the same time. El Cajon had never been a big town, but it had grown in recent years. Fielding's house was in a new neighborhood, a typical California suburb, with neat lawns and identical facades. Sometimes I missed our old neighborhood, where everyone knew each other, said hello, and inquired about the neighbor's business. Here, however, people barely nodded when they met. The kettle whistled softly, and I hurriedly took it off the stove. I took 3 cups out of the cupboard, and it was time to make breakfast. I tried to make my family something delicious every morning, and today I made the blueberry pancakes that Fielding had loved as a child. As I was kneading the batter, I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was Fielding, tall, thin, with unruly brown hair that wouldn't stay in place no matter how much gel he used. As a boy, he was a carbon copy of his father, my son Edward, but now he looked more and more like Hamish. The same brooding eyes, the same habit of scratching the back of his head when he was nervous. "Good morning, grandmother," he mumbled sleepily, slumping back in his chair. "Are you up at the crack of dawn again?" "Good morning, dear. Old habits die hard." I smiled, handing him a cup of tea. "The pancakes will be ready in 10 minutes. He nodded gratefully and stared at his tablet. Fielding worked as a programmer for some data security company. I didn't understand exactly what he was doing, but I was proud of him. The boy had always been smart, went to college, got a good job. After his parents died in a car accident when he was only 14, Hamish and I raised him as our own son. "Where's Una?" I asked as I poured the first batch of batter into the pan. "Finishing her 10th nap." Fielding shrugged. "She had a late shift today." Una worked as a receptionist at the prestigious Azure Spa. She liked being part of the glamorous world, socializing with wealthy clients, even though she came from a middle-class family. Outwardly, Una was a beauty, a slender blonde with cold blue eyes and flawless skin. But behind this beauty was a calculating mind and iron grip. When Fielding first brought her to meet us, I noticed how carefully she looked around the house, assessing the furnishings. I remember when she asked Hamish about his retirement savings, ostensibly in jest, but with genuine interest in her eyes. My husband only laughed and turned the conversation away, but I sensed something wrong. By 8 in the morning, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of fresh pancakes and coffee. Fielding was already dressed and ready to go when Una appeared in the kitchen. In a silk robe with perfect hair and makeup, she looked like she was going to a photo shoot, not having breakfast at home. "Good morning," she said, giving me a cool look. "Pancakes again? You know I'm on a diet, Irene." "Good morning, Una," I replied, trying to keep my tone friendly. "There's some yogurt and fruit in the fridge that I bought for you yesterday." She grimaced, as if I'd suggested something unacceptable, and pulled out a bag of some fancy weight loss tea from the cabinet. "Honey, are you up late tonight?" She turned to Fielding, completely ignoring me. "Yeah, I have a meeting today. I'll be back after 8, he replied, kissing her on the cheek. Grandma, thanks for breakfast. It was delicious. He hurriedly hugged me and ran out the door. As soon as the door closed behind him, the atmosphere in the kitchen changed. Una set the cup aside and looked at me. Irene, have you seen the electricity bill? Her voice became harsh. Why is it so high this month? I sighed. These conversations were happening more and more often. I'm trying to save money, Una, but the washing machine is old, and I have to run it several times to get things washed well. Maybe you should use the laundromat, she suggested with fake concern. Or at least do laundry less often. Why change towels every 3 days? I remained silent, starting to clear the table. Una counted every dime I spent, but she wasn't shy about buying expensive cosmetics and clothes herself. The Fieldings made good money, but their lifestyle required a lot of spending, and my pension and my salary from the post office were a significant help to the family budget. By the way, I noticed you bought a lottery ticket again, Una continued, looking at her perfectly painted nails. Really, Irene? At your age, throwing money away? On the table was indeed the lottery ticket I had bought yesterday. A little indulgence I've allowed myself every week since Hamish and I got married. It was only $3, but it was an excuse for Una to point out my irrationality. It's my money, Una, I said quietly, taking the ticket and tucking it into my apron pocket. And it's a very small amount. Wow, she snorted. And then you complain that you can't help us with the bathroom renovation? Do you know how much you could have saved if you hadn't spent money on that stuff for years? I bit my lip. In the 2 years I'd lived in their house, I'd spent more than half of my savings on repairs, bills, and groceries. And at the same time, I'd been cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry on a regular basis, effectively acting as an unpaid housekeeper. I contribute to the family budget, Una, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. And I help around the house as much as I can. Of course you do, she rolled her eyes. But your help often causes more problems. Remember when you washed my cashmere sweater in the machine? Or when you oversalted dinner for my boss? These were minor missteps that happened to everyone, but Una never missed an opportunity to remind me of them. It was times like these that I regretted agreeing to move. But where was I going to go? Hamish and I had to sell our house to pay for his medical bills and funeral expenses. My modest pension was barely enough to cover my personal expenses, let alone rent my own place in California. I'm sorry about that, was all I could say. I'm on duty until 7 tonight. Then I'll stop by the store. Anything for dinner? No need, Una said. Fielding and I are going to a restaurant after work. Maybe we'll meet some friends, so don't wait up for us. She stood up, leaving her tea behind, and went upstairs. I sighed and looked out the window at the neighbor's house. An elderly couple lived there, Alvin and Diona Pratt. Sometimes, as I passed by, I exchanged a few words with Diona. She seemed like a kind woman, but Una forbade me to get too close to the neighbors. She didn't like it when I socialized with anyone. At 9:30, I left the house and headed for the bus stop. The post office where I worked was 15 minutes away. It was going to be a hot day, typical California weather for late June. The workday at the post office was always predictable. I sorted letters, handled packages, and chatted with customers. Over 30 years, I'd gotten to know the character of every customer, who would come in for their pension on the first payday, and who would leave it for later, who liked to chat, and who preferred to get things done quickly. Hi, Irene. Darla, my coworker and only friend, said hello. How are things at home? Darla was the only person I told about Una's situation. She was 58, and she too lived with her son's family, but she was luckier because her daughter-in-law treated her with respect. Same old, I shrugged, putting on my uniform vest. This morning was another conversation about me spending too much on lottery tickets. Oh my God, Darla rolled her eyes. Is she really counting every dime you have? You give them almost your entire paycheck. That's life, I sighed. Yuna's just different. She's all about status, money, and I'm just an old woman who keeps her from living the life she wants. You don't have to put up with this, Irene. Darla put her hand on my shoulder. There are other options. My sister lives in a nursing home in La Mesa, and it's very nice and reasonably priced. I smiled sadly. We both knew that on my pension, even the most modest nursing home was unaffordable. Thank you, dear, but I can manage. After all, I'm doing this for Fielding. He's a good boy. He's just, too soft on Una. The working day flew by quickly. Before I left, I checked my lottery ticket as usual. No winnings, just like hundreds of times before. But that didn't upset me. The very ritual of buying a ticket, the minute reverie of being lucky one day, gave me a strange comfort. On my way home, I stopped at the supermarket and bought groceries for the week ahead. Despite Yuna's announcement that they'd eat at a restaurant, I made chicken and vegetables anyway. Fielding often came back hungry if he and his friends drank more than they ate. The house greeted me with silence. I laid out the groceries, put the chicken in the oven, and went to take a shower. In the bathroom, I noticed that Yuna was using my towel again. Her own, expensive and soft, she was saving, and she considered mine expendable. After eating dinner alone, I sat in the living room with a book. I didn't want to watch television. Yuna thought I was wasting electricity by watching my boring detectives. Instead, I read by the light of the small lamp Fielding had given me last Christmas. About 11 o'clock, I heard a car pull up. Fielding and Yuna's voices came from the porch. They were obviously arguing. I tensed up. Usually their arguments involved me in one way or another. I don't understand why she can't at least try. Yuna's voice sounded annoyed. Bridget got her mother a job at Sunny Hills, and everyone's happy. Yuna, please, Fielding replied tiredly. Dash. We've already discussed this. Grandma gives us almost all her pension. She doesn't have money for a nursing home. And I can't send her there. She raised me when my parents died. But that doesn't mean we have to support her for the rest of her life, Yuna objected. She doesn't even try to find a part-time job after she retires. She just sits at home, reading her books and spending money on stupid lottery tickets. I closed my eyes, feeling tears come to my throat. Sure, I'd thought about a part-time job after I retired, but who would want a 67-year-old woman with no skills other than sorting letters? The front door opened, and I hurriedly wiped my eyes, pretending to be engrossed in my reading. Grandma, are you still awake? Fielding looked confused, obviously wondering if I'd heard their conversation. Finishing a chapter, dear. I smiled. How was your evening? It was fine, he shrugged. A little tired. Una walked past him without a glance in my direction and went upstairs. Fielding stooped, clearly feeling uncomfortable. Grandma, he started, but I interrupted him. It's okay, honey. Go get some rest. You have to get up early tomorrow. He nodded gratefully and followed his wife. I was alone in the semi-darkened living room, thinking about how my life had changed over the past few years. Before I went to bed, I pulled a new lottery ticket out of my pocket and put it in the little box where I kept all the unchecked tickets. Another week, another hope for a miracle that would never happen. But even a ghostly chance for a better life was better than no hope at all. As I fell asleep, I thought about Darla's words. Maybe I really should have looked for other options. But where would I go at my age? How do I start over when life is already coming to an end? With these heavy thoughts, I fell into a restless sleep, not realizing that very soon my life would change in the most unexpected way. Wednesday began as usual. I made breakfast, saw Fielding off to work, and went to the post office. The weather was surprisingly cool for July in El Cajon, just 75 degrees instead of the usual 90. A light breeze ruffled the leaves of the eucalyptus trees along the road to the bus stop. The post office was unusually busy. Colleagues were gathered in groups, whispering excitedly about something. My heart sank. Such behavior never boded well. Irene! Darla beckoned me over to her. Her normally ruddy face seemed pale. Have you heard? No. What's wrong? I put my bag on the chair and started to put on my uniform vest. The management announced a reorganization, she said in a lowered voice. They're automating the sorting process. They say they'll cut about 30% of the staff. I froze with my vest half zipped. But a lot of us have been working here for decades. They can't just. They can. Darla nodded grimly. The meeting's in 20 minutes. They'll explain everything. The next half hour passed like a blur. Our boss, Raymond Tate, not a bad man, but spineless, read a prepared speech about the need for optimization, the demands of the modern market, and technological progress. The gist of it was that within a month, some employees would receive layoff notices. Who exactly will be fired? Someone from the back row asked. Raymond frowned. The decision would be made based on efficiency and prospectivity of the employees. Everyone knew what that meant. Promising is a euphemism for age. The young would stay, the older ones would be asked to leave. After the meeting, I returned to my seat. My hands trembled slightly as I sorted through the morning's mail. 30 years I'd given this place. Knew every corner, every procedure, the names of all the regulars. And now I could be discarded as an obsolete piece of equipment. Don't worry, Darla put her hand on my shoulder. Maybe they won't hurt us. After all, you have an impeccable record. I nodded, but inside I already knew the truth. At 67, with arthritis and no college degree, I was the perfect candidate for termination. And so it was. Exactly 1 week later, Raymond called me into his office and, without making eye contact, handed me a layoff notice. The severance pay for 30 years of work was humiliatingly small, barely enough for 3 months of modest living. I'm sorry, Irene, he muttered. You're a fine worker, but the decision came down from above. I understand, Raymond, I replied quietly, putting the notice in my bag. When's my last day? In 2 weeks. You don't have to work it if you don't want to. But I've decided to, partly out of pride, partly because I didn't know what I'd be doing at home all day under Una's gaze. On the way home, I pondered how to break the news to Fielding and Una. The news of my dismissal was like a sentence. Without a salary, I was a burden on my family. Una would probably take it as confirmation of her words that I was useless. I found Una at home, which was unusual. She usually stayed at her spa until the evening. You're home early, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Una was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, flipping through a glossy magazine. The client canceled her session. She didn't even look up. Did you decide to leave work early too? Are you finally retiring? I took a deep breath. Actually, I have news. Not good news. Something in my voice made her look up. What's wrong? I'm being downsized. Process automation. Last day of work in 2 weeks. Una slowly put the magazine away. Her face showed a whole range of emotions. Surprise, annoyance, and, I thought, even some satisfaction. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to look for another job. I tried to make my voice sound confident. Una snorted. At your age? Be realistic, Irene. No one's going to hire you when there are plenty of young and energetic candidates around. Her words hurt more than I expected, though deep down I knew she was right. But I wasn't going to give up without a fight. We'll see, I said, heading for the refrigerator. What are we making for dinner? We don't need anything, Una said. Fielding and I are going to the restaurant. We have something important to discuss. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What was it? Family matters, she said evasively, getting up from the table. By the way, since you'll have more free time now, why don't you clean out the garage? It's a mess. Without waiting for an answer, she left the kitchen. I sank into a chair, feeling tired. At 67, I had to start over again. I spent the next few days looking for a job. I updated my resume, registered on job sites, and called everyone I knew. Darla helped me make a list of places that could use my skills: small post offices, courier services, stores. The reality was harsher than I'd anticipated. At the first employment agency, the counselor, a young woman in her 30s, looked sympathetically at my date of birth. Mrs. Lockwood, I'm going to be honest with you, she said. Employers are looking for people with a growth mindset. In your case, that's going to be difficult. I don't need a career, I countered. Just a job to pay the bills. I understand, but many companies invest in employee training and want to see a return. Older workers are often, well, it's harder for them to adapt to new technology. I learned a computer when I was 50, I said, and the electronic accounting system at the post office. I can learn. The counselor smiled politely, but I could see that she had already mentally given up on me. Of course, Mrs. Lockwood, we'll do our best. Perhaps you should consider part-time or seasonal work. I left the agency feeling like I'd been patted on the head and sent to live out the rest of my days in a rocking chair. At the other places, the story repeated itself. No one said I was too old, but the looks on the faces of potential employers said exactly that. At the Daily Fresh chain store, the hiring manager, a man about my age, was more blunt. Look, he said when we were alone, I'd hire you for the cash register, seriously. You seem responsible and experienced. But corporate policy, they want young faces, attract more customers, you know. Isn't that age discrimination? I asked. He shrugged. Technically, no. They'll never say it's about age. There will always be other reasons: lack of qualifications, mismatch with the corporate culture, whatever. At home, things were getting tense. Una was giving me silent boycotts, no longer including me in the family dinner plans, as if I no longer existed. Fielding looked confused, torn between his wife and his grandmother. How's the job hunt going? He asked me one evening when we were alone in the kitchen. Not so good, I answered honestly. It turns out that at 67 it's not so easy to find a job. Grandma, you don't have to worry about that. He put his hand on my shoulder. You have a pension, and you can always live with us. Your wife doesn't think so, I said quietly. Fielding sighed. Una's just worried about finances. We have a mortgage, a car loan. But we'll manage, I promise. I could see the genuine concern in his eyes and felt guilty for being a problem for him. Maybe I should look for another place, I suggested. Something small within my means? No. Fielding seemed genuinely shocked. Don't even think about it. It's your house, Grandma. But was it really mine? Lately, I was feeling more and more like an intruder. The next day, when I returned from another unsuccessful job interview, the house was being renovated. Two workers were removing old furniture from the guest bedroom I was occupying. What's going on? I asked Una, who was supervising the process. Oh, Irene, you're back already. She smiled radiantly. Mine is surprise. We've decided to convert this room into a home office for Fielding. His company is going partially remote. And where? Where am I going to sleep? My voice was shaking. We'll put the cot in the closet. She waved her hand toward the small windowless room. There's plenty of room in there. It's only temporary, until we find a better one. The pantry was the size of a closet, barely big enough for shelves of canned goods and household chemicals. Putting a bed in there meant I'd be sleeping between bottles of bleach and packages of toilet paper. You can't seriously suggest that, I said, feeling a wave of indignation rising inside. It's not even a room. Well, at your age, how much do you need? Una shrugged. Besides, you realize things have changed. Without a job, you can't contribute the same amount to the family budget, so you have to save space. I pay for my living expenses with my pension, I reminded myself, and I do all the housework. That's not enough, Una said. Prices are going up, but your pension isn't. Fielding is too kind to tell you, but it's getting hard for us to support another person. At that moment, I realized that Una had been waiting for the moment to get rid of me. My dismissal was the perfect excuse for her. Where's Fielding? I asked. Does he know about this? Of course, Una smiled as if she were talking about the weather. It was our idea together. Fielding's at work. He'll be back late. I didn't believe my grandson would agree to such a thing, but doubt crept into my soul. Lately, he'd been agreeing with Una more and more in arguments, avoiding talking to me alone. What if he really thought I was a burden? I'll talk to him tonight, I said, trying to keep my dignity. In the meantime, I'll ask the workers to stop. This is my room, after all. Your room? Una raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry, Irene, but this is our home. We let you live here, but the rooms belong to us. The words hit like a slap in the face. I silently went upstairs to the bathroom, the only place I could be alone. Sitting on the edge of the tub, I let the tears flow. In 2 years, not only had I given most of my savings to fixing up their house and bills, but I'd also served as a free housekeeper and nanny, and this is how I was repaid. That evening, when Fielding returned, I tried to talk to him about what was going on. Grandma, there's been a misunderstanding. He looked embarrassed. I never agreed to put you in the closet. We did discuss a home office, but I thought it would be in the basement. Your wife has already started renovations, I said. My stuff is out. I'll talk to her. Fielding rubbed the bridge of his nose. She must have misunderstood something. But the conversation I'd had with Una in the kitchen, when she thought I couldn't hear, told me everything I needed to know. Honey, we can't support your grandmother forever, Una said. We have our own plans for our lives. We wanted to travel, remember? Buy a new car. With her expenses, we'll never be able to afford it. I can't put her out on the street. Fielding's voice sounded uncertain. She raised me. No one's talking about the street. Una's voice had a hint of irritation in it. There are nursing homes, social programs. She's 67. It's time to think about specialized care. Grandma doesn't need specialized care, Fielding objected. She's completely self-sufficient. But not financially self-sufficient, Una countered. Look, I understand how you feel, I really do. But we're young, we have our whole lives ahead of us. Do you really want to spend it taking care of an elderly relative? What about when we have kids? Do you want them to grow up in cramped quarters because Grandma occupies one of the rooms? I didn't listen any further and quietly went up to my room. Una's words stung like acid. Had I really become a hindrance to Fielding's happiness? Maybe I really should have looked for alternatives. The next day, I went to social services to find out about housing options for seniors on limited incomes. The results were disappointing. Waiting lists for social housing stretched for years, and affordable care homes cost more than my pension. Unfortunately, without family support or additional income, options are limited, the social worker explained, looking at me sympathetically. Perhaps we should consider co-housing with other seniors or moving to a less expensive neighborhood. But El Cajon was already one of San Diego's most affordable suburbs. Where else would it be cheaper? To the desert? Back home, I had another unpleasant surprise waiting for me. Una had organized a family council with her parents, who had traveled from Santa Barbara specifically for this purpose. The topic of discussion, as it turned out, was my future. Irene, we're all concerned about your situation, began Una's mother, Violet Quincy. a woman with so much Botox on her face she could barely blink. It's not safe for you to live alone at your age, but burdening a young family isn't an option either. I don't live alone, I pointed out. I wasn't planning to. You see, Yuna's father, Preston, stepped in, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. Violet and I researched our options and found a great nursing home in Arizona, very affordable, with basic medical care. Arizona? I couldn't believe my ears. But my whole life is here in California. It's a better climate for your joints. Violet patted my arm affectionately. And the prices are a lot lower. Your pension will be enough for a modest but comfortable life. I looked at Fielding, who sat with his head down, avoiding my gaze. Una was beaming with enthusiasm. We can help with the move, she added. Daddy's even willing to pay for the first month until you get settled in. That's very generous. I struggled to find the words. But I'm not going to move to another state. Grandma, no one's forcing you. Fielding finally spoke up. It's just an option. It's the only realistic option, Una corrected, considering your finances. I got up from the table. Thank you for your concern, but I'll decide where and how I want to live. Stubbornness won't solve the problem, Irene. Violet shook her head. Think of Fielding. You don't want to be a burden to him, do you? It was a low blow. I walked silently out of the room, my knees trembling. In the hallway, I heard Una saying, "See? She doesn't even want to discuss reasonable options. Typical senile stubbornness." I hardly slept that night, pondering my situation. For the first time in my life, I felt completely helpless. Without a job, with a minimal pension, in a house where I was blatantly unwanted, I was trapped. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual and went to the bus stop. I needed to get some fresh air, to think. In my pocket was a lottery ticket I had bought the day before, my last foolish hope for a miracle. When I got home for dinner, I found Una and Fielding in the middle of another argument. I don't understand why you're being so stubborn. Una was almost shouting. This is the best option for everyone. Because this is my house and my grandmother. For the first time, I heard Fielding raise his voice at his wife. I'm not sending her to another state just because it's inconvenient for you to share a house with her. It's not about convenience, it's about money, Una parried. We can't afford to support her, especially now that she's lost her job. They didn't notice my appearance, and I retreated quietly into the hallway, my cheeks burning with shame and anger. Had I really caused a rift in their family? I certainly didn't want that. That evening, as I was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, Una approached me with feigned friendliness. Irene, have you thought about our proposal? She asked. Arizona is a great place for people in your position. In what position? I turned to her, wiping my hands on my towel. You know, she made an indefinite gesture. Elderly, unemployed, with limited means. I've lived in California all my life, I said calmly. My husband is buried here. My grandson lives here. I'm not going anywhere. Una sighed with feigned regret. I'm sorry you're so selfish, Irene. Think of Fielding. He's torn between you and me, and it's not fair. If you really love him, you have to let him live his life. Her words were like poisoned arrows, each one finding a vulnerable spot. I really loved my grandson, and I didn't want to cause problems in his marriage. I'll think about it, was all I could say. Una smiled, satisfied that she had struck a nerve. Good. In the meantime, why don't you move into the closet? The workers are finishing renovating your former room, and we need somewhere to put the new computer desk. At that moment, I realized I'd reached my limit of patience. It was one thing to accept my sister-in-law's dislike, but it was quite another to let myself be humiliated in a house where I gave everything I had. No, Una, I said firmly. I will not sleep in the pantry. If Fielding really agrees to it, let him tell me himself. In the meantime, I'll stay in my room." Her face contorted with anger. "You don't understand, do you? This is not your home. You're here on a bird's license. Without money, there's no living. It's as simple as that. And the sooner you realize that, the better for everyone." With those words, she walked out of the kitchen, leaving me stunned at the cruelty of her words. At that moment, I realized that my position in this house had become unbearable, and something had to change. The morning was overcast, a rarity for El Cajon at this time of year. Heavy gray clouds hung over the city, heralding rain that hadn't fallen in months. I stared out the window, thinking about how quickly life could change. A month ago, I had a job, respect in my family, and confidence in my future. Now I felt like a stray dog being tolerated out of mercy. Today, I had an interview scheduled at a small grocery store on the outskirts of town. The part-time cashier position wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. It didn't pay much, but it didn't require any special skills or physical stamina. I put on my best suit, dark blue, a little out of fashion, but still decent. I applied light makeup, trying to look younger. Every wrinkle on my face now seemed a traitorous sign of my age, every gray hair another disadvantage in the eyes of a potential employer. Una came down to the kitchen as I was finishing breakfast. Our communication had dwindled to a minimum over the past few days. A few dry phrases about the weather or household chores. She pretended that nothing had happened, that she hadn't tried to evict me to the pantry, that she hadn't discussed sending me to Arizona with my parents. But the tension between us could be cut with a knife. "Is the interview today?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Yeah, 10 o'clock. I glanced at my watch. "I'd have to leave in 20 minutes to catch the bus." "Hmm." She sipped her coffee. "What kind of place?" "Cashier at Fresh Market?" I tried to sound casual, though the thought of competing with teenagers for low-paying jobs at 67 was bitter. "Full-time?" "No, 3 days a week, 6 hours." Una snorted. "How much do they pay? $10 an hour? 15? Even if they hire you, that's a drop in the bucket." I didn't say anything. Of course she was right. Even with this job, my income was barely enough to cover my basic expenses. But what could I do? "Good luck," Una said as she left the kitchen. There wasn't a shadow of sincerity in her voice. I sighed, gathered the dishes, and rinsed the plates. Little daily rituals helped maintain a sense of normalcy when everything around me was falling apart. On my way to the bus stop, I stopped at a small corner store. I had a few dollars in change left over, so I decided to spend it on a lottery ticket. It was probably stupid to spend my last money on such nonsense, but this little tradition gave me a tiny bit of hope, a fleeting sense of control over my destiny. The usual, as usual, smiled at the salesman, an elderly Korean man named Jin, whom we'd gotten to know over the years of my weekly shopping. "Yes, thank you." I put my change on the counter. "Big jackpot today," he said, holding out a ticket to me. 20 million. Maybe you'll get lucky." I smiled weakly. "That would be nice. Good luck, Mrs. Lockwood," he shouted after me. The bus was on time, which was rare. I sat by the window, smoothing my ticket and looking at the numbers. 6, 11, 17, 24, 32, 41. A random assortment, nothing special. Hundreds of thousands of people buy tickets like that every week, dreaming of easy money. It was ridiculous to think I'd be the lucky one. And yet, somewhere in the depths of my soul, there was hope. What if? Fresh Market was a small organic grocery store, squeezed between a laundromat and a repair store. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. Behind the counter stood a 45-year-old woman with a tired face and dyed red hair. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "I'm here for a job interview," I said, "for Mr. Peyton." "Oh, yes, he's waiting for you in the back." She waved toward a door at the back of the store. Mr. Peyton turned out to be a friendly middle-aged man with a graying beard and kind eyes. He asked me about my previous experience, listened carefully, and even seemed impressed with my record. "You have an excellent resume, Mrs. Lockwood," he said. "30 years in the same position speaks volumes about your reliability." I felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who saw my age as an advantage, not a disadvantage. "But unfortunately, for this position, we need someone who can work evening shifts and weekends," he continued. "We have a lot of students who shop after class. Would you be able to work until 22 hours? My heart dropped. Buses in our neighborhood rarely ran after 9 p.m., and I couldn't afford a cab. "I'm afraid not," I answered honestly. "I have trouble with transportation later in the day." Mr. Peyton nodded sympathetically. "I see. I'm sorry. You seem like a great candidate, but demands are demands. I left the store with a heavy heart. Another interview, another rejection. How many of those have there been? 10? 15? I'd lost count. It was finally starting to rain, a fine, drizzling, bone-chilling rain. I didn't have an umbrella, and by the time I reached the bus stop, my suit was soaked through. Looking at my blurry reflection in the puddle, I barely recognized myself. Where was that confident woman who had worked at the post office for 30 years, raised her grandson, survived the death of her husband? Now all I saw was an old, drenched, useless woman. The bus was delayed. I stood under the visor of the bus stop, shivering with cold and self-pity. Cars drove by, spraying me with road spray. One driver didn't even slow down when he went through a puddle, and the muddy water poured over me from head to toe. When I finally made it home, it was about 3 in the afternoon. I was soaked, cold, and feeling completely wrecked. I just wanted to take a hot shower, change into dry clothes, and forget myself for a few hours. But when I opened the front door, I froze on the threshold. In the hallway were my suitcases, the old battered ones I'd brought with me 2 years ago when I'd moved in with Fielding and Una. Next to them were boxes of my belongings, hastily packed. "What's going on?" I asked out loud, not addressing anyone in particular. Una came out of the living room. She was impeccably dressed. As always, a cream blouse, a tight black skirt, heeled shoes. Perfect makeup, not a single hair out of place. Looking at her, so well groomed and dry, made me feel even more pathetic in my drenched suit. You're back," she said in the tone she used when talking to deliverymen or plumbers. "Good. I was just finishing packing up your things. My stuff? I couldn't believe my ears. Why did you do that?" "Irene," Una sighed, as if explaining something to a child. "We talked about this. We need your room for Fielding's home office. The workmen are already waiting to install the furniture. We didn't agree that I would move out." My voice shook with anger and resentment. "You can't just put me out on the street." "No one's kicking you out," she rolled her eyes. "I told you it's the pantry or Arizona. It's your choice." I stood there, unable to believe what was happening. It was a nightmare coming true. "Where's Fielding?" I asked. "Does he know what you're doing?" "Fielding's at work," Una replied. "And yes, he knows. We've been talking about it all night." "I don't believe it," I shook my head. "My grandson couldn't agree to throw me out on the street." "Don't be dramatic," Una snorted. "No one is throwing you out on the street. You just need to live on your own, like all adults. Fielding and I don't have to support you just because you're his grandmother." At that moment, the front door opened and Fielding walked in. He looked dumbfounded to see my suitcases in the hallway and me, wet and confused, standing in front of them. "What's going on?" he asked, shifting his gaze from me to Una. "Did you know about this?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "Did you know she was going to kick me out of the house?" Fielding turned pale. "Una, we agreed to wait," he said, "to find a suitable place for grandmother before." We've been looking for a month, Una said. We haven't found anything, and the workers are waiting to finish your office. Time is money, darling. I looked at my grandson, not recognizing him. Where is the loving boy that Hamish and I raised? Who cried on my shoulder when he broke his knees? Who swore he'd always take care of me when he grew up? Did you really agree to this? I asked quietly. Fielding lowered his eyes. Grandma, we can't go on living like this. Una's right. You need specialized care, and we don't have the capacity. Don't lie to me now, I interrupted him. It's not about care. I'm completely independent. It's about money and the fact that your wife doesn't want me in her house. Our house, Una corrected. And yes, I'm not hiding the fact that I'm tired of living with an old man who criticizes my every decision and spends our money with Fielding. I've never criticized you, I countered. And I gave most of my pension and salary to this house, which didn't even cover half of your expenses, Una retorted. Do you know how much the utilities cost? Groceries? Medication? Una, stop it, Fielding intervened. You promised we'd do this humanely. What am I doing? She flailed her arms. I even helped pack her things, but she must realize the reality. Without money, there is no living here. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. No living here without money. It was like I wasn't a family member, but a tenant who owed rent. Are you serious? I looked at Fielding. Did you agree with that? My grandson looked torn. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Grandma, he stammered. I don't know what to do. Una's right that we're struggling financially. But you're my family, and I don't want you to leave. Then why are my things packed? I asked. Why did you let her do that? I didn't. He raised his voice. I thought we were still discussing options. Options? Una intervened. What options, Fielding? We've been discussing the same thing for a month. Your grandmother lost her job, can't find a new one, and we can't afford to support her. Period. I'm not asking you to support me, I said, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. I'm asking for respect. I gave everything I had to help you renovate this house. I cooked, I cleaned, I did laundry. I was here when you had the flu, Una, and brought you tea in bed. I babysat your sister's kids when you had to go away for the weekend. And this is how you repay me? No one denies your help. Una changed tactics, her voice turning honeyed. We really appreciate everything you've done. But understand us, we are a young family. We have our own plans, our own dreams. We can't live with our parents forever. I'm not your mother, I replied sharply. And I didn't impose on you. Fielding was the one who asked me to move out after Hamish died. Yes, and that was a mistake, Una blurted out, which we're in the process of correcting. There was a heavy silence in the room. Fielding looked like he was going to throw up. Una stood with her arms crossed over her chest, a look of cold superiority on her face, and I felt something inside me finally break. Okay, I said quietly. I'll leave, right now. Grandma, no. Fielding took a step toward me. We'll find a solution, I promise. You don't have to leave tonight. I think I do. I looked at him sadly. I won't stay where I'm not respected. Where will you go? There was genuine concern in his voice. Don't worry about it. I started to put on the coat I had just taken off. I'll be fine. See, she wants to go, Una interjected. She must have a plan. I didn't have a plan. No plan at all. But my pride wouldn't let me admit it. Could we at least help you find a place to live? Fielding suggested, or give you some money to get you started. No, thank you. I buttoned my coat. I can do without your help. Una snorted. You're being dramatic again. You always do. I ignored her and took the smallest suitcase. the one with the most essentials in it. The rest could be picked up later when I found a place to stay. Grandma, please. Fielding looked desperate. Don't leave like this. Let's sit down and discuss things. There's nothing to discuss. I looked at him sadly. You've made your choice, Fielding, and it wasn't me. With those words, I opened the door and walked out of the house I'd thought of as my own for the past 2 years. It was still raining, but not so hard. The drops ran down my face, mixing with the tears I could no longer hold back. I didn't look back, though I could hear Fielding calling my name. I just walked forward, clutching the handle of my suitcase, so white my knuckles turned white. In the bag slung over my shoulder was my wallet with a few dollars, my papers, and the lottery ticket I'd bought this morning with the last of my money. It was only after walking a block away from the house that I stopped, realizing the horror of my situation. I had no money, no place to live, no job. Where would I go? What was I gonna do? My first thought was to call Darla, but I immediately dismissed it. My only friend lived in a small apartment with her son and daughter-in-law. They didn't have room for another person. Besides, I couldn't afford to ask for directions. It would be humiliating. The nearest motel was a 15-minute walk away, a cheap place where truckers and seasonal workers stayed. Not the nicest place for an older woman, but I had no choice. I waded through the wet streets of El Cajon, feeling every drop of rain as another reminder of my worthlessness. 67 years old, and here I am homeless, wanted by no one, rejected by my own family. Without money, there is no living here. Yuna's words rang in my ears, each time echoing with a new wave of pain. Was all my value to them measured only in dollars? Did years of love and care mean nothing compared to the financial burden I represented? In my coat pocket, I fumbled for a lottery ticket. How ironic to spend the last of my money on a dream of riches when the reality was so cruel. But right now, that little rectangle of paper was the only hope I could cling to. I squeezed the ticket in my pocket, feeling the paper getting damp from the rain and the sweat of my palm. Please, I thought, not addressing anyone in particular, maybe fate or the God I'd long ago stopped believing in. Please give me a chance, at least some chance. The roadside motel lived up to its unassuming name, a single-story building of time-darkened brick with a cracked neon sign, half of the letters unlit. The parking lot was filled with mostly trucks and used cars, many of which looked like they hadn't moved in months. I stood at the front desk, nervously clutching the handle of my small suitcase. The inside smelled musty, of cigarettes and cheap air freshener that only amplified rather than masked the unpleasant odors. Room for one? The receptionist asked, not lifting his eyes from the magazine. A middle-aged man with greasy hair and 3-day stubble. Yes, please. I tried to keep my voice calm and confident. How many nights? Good question. I had no idea what I was going to do next. One to start with, I answered. $40. He finally looked up and gave me an appraising look. A look of surprise flashed across his face. An older woman was obviously not a frequent visitor to this establishment. I pulled out my wallet and counted out the money. After paying, I had only $32 left. Not even enough for a second night. Room 112 at the end of the hall. He handed me the key, a real metal key, not a plastic card like in modern hotels. Checkout is at 11 in the morning. I thanked him and headed toward the room. The corridor was dimly lit, with stains of unknown origin on the walls. Muffled voices, music, and the sound of television could be heard from some of the doors. In one room, someone was cursing loudly. Room 112 greeted me with stale air and a dreary look. A small window with faded curtains, a broken bed with a bedspread of questionable cleanliness, an ancient television screwed to the wall so it wouldn't be stolen. In the corner was a small refrigerator that hummed as if it were about to explode. The bathroom was no better, with cracked tiles, a bathtub yellowed by time, and a toilet bowl with a loose seat. There were two tiny bars of soap on a shelf and a towel so thin that the light shone through it. I sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time all day, allowed myself to fully comprehend what was happening. I had been kicked out of my home. My grandson, whom I raised as my own son, has not stood up for me. I have no job, almost no money, and I'm sitting in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town where truckers and prostitutes usually stay. The tears I had been holding back all day finally broke through. I cried like I hadn't cried since Hamish's death. Deep, soul-crushing sobs. I cried for my lost home, for Fielding's betrayal, for Una's cruelty, for my helplessness and loneliness. When the tears dried up, I felt a strange desolation. It was as if the last vestiges of hope and will to live had gone out of me along with the tears. I sat there, staring at nothing, unable even to undress and lie down. It was beginning to get dark outside the window. I kept the light on, sitting in the thickening twilight, listening to the sound of the rain, which had picked up again. Occasionally, a car would pass by the window, and then the room would light up for a moment, catching the outline of the furniture in the darkness. I don't know how long I sat like that, but at some point my stomach reminded me that I hadn't eaten since morning. I didn't have any food, and I didn't feel like going outside in this weather to look for a cafe. Besides, I had to save every cent. In desperation, I opened the small refrigerator. Oddly enough, there was a bottle of water and a wrapped sandwich, apparently left by a previous guest. I checked the date on the package. The sandwich was still fresh. This was an unexpected stroke of luck. After eating, I felt a little better. Physically, at least. Mentally, I was still at rock bottom. Turning on the TV, I started aimlessly flipping through the channels. News, sports, reality shows, soap operas. Nothing could distract me from my gloomy thoughts. Finally, I stopped at the local channel, where some talk show was on. The host, a middle-aged woman with a dazzling smile, was talking about the importance of not giving up in the face of life's difficulties. "You never know when your luck will turn around," she said from the screen. "Sometimes fate gives us the most unexpected gifts when we least expect it." I grinned bitterly. What gifts of fate could await a 67-year-old woman with no money, no job, and no roof over her head? The talk show ended and the local news began. I was about to turn off the TV and try to go to sleep when I heard, "And now for the best news of the evening, the Lucky Chance lottery drawing. The jackpot tonight is $20 million. Someone could be a multimillionaire tonight." I thought back to the ticket I had bought that morning. Of course, the chances of winning were slim to none, but why not check it out? At least it would take my mind off my gloomy thoughts. I took the ticket out of my bag and smoothed it out on the bed. The randomly selected numbers stared back at me from the paper. 6, 11, 17, 24, 32, 41. A lottery machine with multicolored balls appeared on the screen. The host, a young man in a brightly colored suit, announced the beginning of the drawing. "And the first number tonight is 6. I blinked. 6, just like on my ticket. The second number, 11. My heart skipped a beat. Coincidence? It must be. The third number, 17. I felt my palms start to sweat. 3 coincidences in a row. It happens, but rarely. The fourth number of the evening, 24. I couldn't sit still any longer. 4 out of 4 coincidences. The odds were getting slimmer and slimmer. The fifth number, 32. 5 out of 5. I jumped out of bed, unable to contain my excitement. 1 ball, only 1 ball left. And the last number, the 6th number of today's drawing, 41. The world stopped. I stared at the screen, unable to believe my eyes and ears. All 6 numbers, all 6 matched. That's impossible. There's no such thing. Congratulations to the lucky winner of $20 million today, the announcer cheerfully announced. The winning combination is 6, 11, 17, 24, 32, 41. I looked at the ticket in my hands, then at the TV screen. I checked the numbers over and over again. Maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe this was some kind of cruel joke. But the numbers didn't change. They matched. Every single one. I won. I, Irene Lockwood, had won $20 million in the lottery. My knees buckled, and I sank to the bed. It was too much for one day. I was kicked out of my house in the morning, homeless with $32 in my pocket, and in the evening I became a multimillionaire. At first I laughed, a hysterical, broken laugh. Then I cried again. Then I laughed again. My emotions were overflowing, and I couldn't control them. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What should I do now? Who do I tell? How do I get the money? Isn't this a mistake? I turned on my laptop, the old one I'd brought with me at the last minute. Connecting to the motel's Wi-Fi, I went to the lottery website and checked the results again. Everything matched. I had indeed won. There on the site were instructions for winners. You had to go to the nearest lottery office with your ticket and ID. There was such an office in San Diego, about an hour's bus ride from El Cajon. I spent a sleepless night guarding my ticket like the apple of my eye. I put it in a plastic baggie so it wouldn't get ruined and hid it in the inside pocket of my coat. Every hour I checked to see if it was still there. 1,000 thoughts and plans swirled in my head. In the morning, as soon as it dawned, I gathered my few belongings and went to the bus stop. The day was clear, as if yesterday's rain had washed away all the clouds. That seemed like a good sign. At the lottery company's office, I was greeted with professional courtesy. The young woman behind the counter checked my ticket through a special machine and nodded. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lockwood," she said. "You have indeed won the jackpot. You just need to fill out a few forms, and we'll explain the further procedure." The next 2 hours passed like a blur. I filled out paperwork, answered questions, showed documents. It was explained to me that I could choose to receive the entire amount in a lump sum, but with taxes deducted, or to stretch the payments over 30 years in equal installments. "Many people prefer the lump sum," said the office manager, an elderly man with graying temples. "But from a tax point of view, it's better to stretch the money out. However, at your age, perhaps the first option is preferable." I decided to take the whole amount at once. After deducting taxes, it amounted to about $12 million. Still unimaginable money for me. "We recommend that winners consult a financial advisor," the manager continued. "We have a list of proven professionals who have helped our past winners." I nodded, still not fully believing what was happening. "One more thing." He lowered his voice slightly. "You can remain anonymous if you wish. Not all winners want publicity." I hesitated. On the one hand, I had nothing to hide. On the other hand, I didn't want Fielding and Una to learn about my winnings from the news. I'd rather remain anonymous, I decided. That's a very wise decision. The manager nodded approvingly. "Believe me, life is much more peaceful when the whole world doesn't know about your money." I left the lottery office with a thick folder of documents and a head spinning with new possibilities. The money was to be deposited into my account within 2 weeks. In the meantime, I was given a small advance of $10,000 to get me settled in. The first thing I did was to find a decent hotel and rent a room for a week. Then I bought new clothes to replace the ones I had left at Fielding's house. After that, I contacted one of the recommended financial advisors, a woman named Helen Brooks. Helen turned out to be a professional. She was neither surprised nor overly enthusiastic when she learned of the amount of my winnings, which inspired confidence. "Dash Mrs. Lockwood," she said, when we met in her office the next day. First of all, let me congratulate you. Now let's talk about how to preserve and increase your fortune. We spent several hours discussing various investment options, tax strategies, and inheritance planning. Helen was patient and explained everything in simple terms without overloading us with financial jargon. Many lottery winners lose all their money within a few years, she warned. It's usually due to reckless spending, risky investments, or pressure from family and friends. I don't have many relatives or friends to put pressure on. I grinned bitterly. Helen looked at me sympathetically, but didn't question me. In any case, I recommend that you be careful with information about your winnings, and let's make a plan that will give you a comfortable life and financial security. The plan we developed was conservative and rational. We decided to invest most of the amount in safe bonds, index funds, and a small portion in real estate. This was to provide a steady income without much risk. What about a house for you? Helen asked. You mentioned that you were living in a hotel now. I wondered. Of course, I could afford any house now, even a mansion. But why would I need a huge house at my age? Who would I be hosting there? I want something small but cozy, I said. In a quiet neighborhood, maybe with a garden. Nothing extravagant. That's a sensible approach, Helen approved. I can recommend a good realtor who specializes in working with wealthy clients and values confidentiality. The next day, I met with the realtor, Benjamin Green, an elegant man in his 50s with impeccable manners. He showed me several house options in nice neighborhoods in San Diego and the suburbs. I liked a small but elegant house in La Jolla, an upscale neighborhood overlooking the ocean. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a Mediterranean-style kitchen, and, importantly, a well-maintained garden with lemon trees. The house was not new, but in excellent condition, with character and history. It's the last house in the neighborhood at this price, Benjamin said. It's only $2 million. The owners are moving to Florida and want to sell quickly. $2 million. In the past, that amount would have seemed astronomical to me. Now it was only a fraction of my fortune. I'll take it, I've decided. When can I move in? As long as the paperwork and payment are done quickly, in 2 weeks, the realtor replied. The transaction went smoothly. The lottery money was deposited into my account, and I paid for the house in full, mortgage-free. Helen helped me sort out the taxes and title. During the waiting period, I bought a car, not a luxury car, just a reliable and comfortable Toyota Camry of the latest model. I also revamped my closet by buying high-quality but not garish clothes. No designer brands or flashy outfits. I stayed true to my style. The day I received the keys to my new home was one of the happiest days of my life. I stood on the doorstep holding a bunch of keys and couldn't believe it was really my house, bought with my money, with no debts or obligations to anyone. The house was partially furnished. The previous owners had left the basic furniture that fit perfectly. All I had to do was add a few personal touches to turn the place into a real home. I spent the day exploring every corner of the house, planning what I would put where, what flowers I would plant in the garden. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy and free. In the evening, I went out on the terrace with a cup of tea and watched the sun set into the ocean, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. A light breeze carried the smell of salt and blossoming trees. At that moment, I remembered Yuna's words, "There is no living here without money." How ironic. Now I had more money than they did, more than I could spend in the rest of my life. But it wasn't about the money. It was about my newfound freedom and dignity. The ability to live my life the way I wanted, without having to answer to anyone, without feeling like a burden. As I watched the sunset, I thought about how strange life is. Sometimes the hardest trials turn out to be unexpected blessings. If Yuna hadn't kicked me out of the house, I never would have bought that lottery ticket, never won, never found this new life. With these thoughts, I took out my phone and took several pictures of my new house, outside and inside. I took especially careful pictures of the terrace overlooking the ocean, the living room with the fireplace, the kitchen with marble countertops, and the garden with the lemon trees. These were the pictures I was going to send to Una, not out of revenge, no, just to show that life goes on, and sometimes it has the most amazing surprises. It's been 2 weeks since I moved into my new home. Every morning I woke up feeling like it was all a dream that was about to end. I would open my eyes in the spacious bedroom overlooking the garden and just lay there for a few seconds, enjoying the peace and quiet. No one was sighing irritably in the kitchen. No one was throwing slanted glances. No one was calculating how much electricity I had wasted. During these days, I gradually arranged the house, turning it into a cozy nest. I ordered many things online. Helen had shown me how to do it, and I quickly learned the new technology. I loved choosing every little thing, from curtains to teaspoons. For the first time in years, I could follow only my own taste without thinking about whether anyone else would like it. I bought soft plaids for cool evenings on the terrace, a set of handmade ceramic dishes, a few paintings of seascapes by local artists. Nothing flashy or ostentatious. Everything is simple, high quality, and pleasing to the eye. In the garden, I planted several varieties of roses that I had always loved but could not afford. I hired a gardener, an elderly Mexican man named Ernesto, who came twice a week to keep things in order. He also helped me set up a small vegetable garden where I planned to grow herbs and tomatoes. Gradually, I got to know my neighbors, who were mostly middle-aged and elderly couples. They turned out to be friendly people. Many of them had lived here for decades. No one asked too many questions about my sudden appearance, though I felt some curiosity. I introduced myself as a widow, recently moved from El Cajon. That was usually enough. In La Jolla, people respected each other's privacy. The neighbor to my right, an elegant lady in her 60s named Beverly, invited me to tea and introduced me to the local book club. I was happy to join. I had always loved to read, but in the Fielding and Una house, I rarely found the time or opportunity to do so. Every day I savored my new life, as if I were tasting a rare, exquisite fruit. Simple pleasures seemed an incredible luxury. Breakfast on the terrace, a leisurely stroll along the promenade, an hour or two with a book in the shade of a lemon tree. And yet thoughts of Fielding did not leave me. I hadn't received a single call from him since the day I'd left their house. Of course, he didn't have my new number, but he could contact me through Darla or other mutual acquaintances if he really wanted to. That silence hurt deeper than I was willing to admit. Today was a special day. Exactly 1 month since Una had kicked me out the door, and 2 weeks since moving into the new house. I decided it was time to give a little something of myself. I chose the best photos of my new home. The exterior with the driveway buried in flowers, the living room with large panoramic windows and ocean views, the terrace with comfortable lounge chairs, the kitchen with marble countertops and the latest appliances. In one photo, I was sitting in the garden with a cup of tea, smiling and rested, wearing a new pastel-colored linen dress. Sending these photos was strangely exciting. I didn't consider myself a vindictive person, and I didn't want to hurt Fielding. But Una deserved to know that her saying that there is no living without money had turned out to be an unexpected blessing for me. I gathered the photos into a beautiful collage, added a shot of the coast visible from my terrace, and signed simply, "My New Home." Irene. My finger hovered over the send button. My heart was pounding like I was about to do something forbidden. In a way, it was. I was about to break the silence, to show that I was not only surviving, but thriving. Finally, I took a deep breath and pressed the button. A text message with the pictures went to Una's number. I put the phone away and walked to the window. It was a clear day, with a light breeze from the ocean. Roses were blooming in the garden, their fragrance wafting into the house through the open windows. A strange calmness came over me that what was about to happen was on its way. All that remained was to wait for a reaction. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang less than 10 minutes later. Yuna's number popped up on the screen. I let the phone ring a few times before answering it. "Hello," I said quietly. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then Yuna's voice came out, unaccustomedly uncertain. "Irene, is this, is this really your house?" "Yes," I answered simply. "But how? How? I don't understand." I smiled as I pictured her confused face. Yuna, always so sure of her superiority, now sounded like a lost child. "Life is full of surprises, Yuna," I said softly. "Sometimes it gives us unexpected gifts. But this? It looks like a house in La Jolla." There was disbelief in her voice. "Houses like that cost millions. 2 million to be exact," I said, unable to resist a little boast. "But it's worth it. The view of the ocean is priceless." Another pause followed. I could almost hear the gears turning in Yuna's head, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "You? Did you win the lottery?" she finally asked. "The ticket you always bought?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Funny coincidence, isn't it? The very day you told me that without money there is no living." Yuna made a strange sound, something between a chuckle and a sob. "Irene, I don't know what to say. It's unbelievable." How much, how much did you win?" "Enough," I said evasively. "Enough to never have to worry about money again." "Listen, Irene." Yuna's voice suddenly changed to the honeyed tone she used to use with important clients at the spa. "I know we've had our differences. Yeah, I'm sorry for what happened. It was a difficult time. We were all on edge because of financial problems." I kept quiet, letting her continue her clumsy attempts to justify herself. "Fielding is so worried," she continued. "He hasn't been able to find a place for himself since you left. We've been looking for you, we really have. We've called hospitals, the police, even morgues." I doubted the truth of her words. If they were really looking for me, they would have found a way to contact me. Through Darla, through my friends at the post office. But I decided not to accuse her of lying, at least not now. "It's all right, Yuna," I said. "As you can see, I'm fine. Better than okay." "Irene, listen," she said, a pleading tone in her voice. "You have to come back. You're important to this family. Fielding misses you. I miss you. This house isn't the same without you." I could barely keep from laughing bitterly. Until a month ago, this house wasn't mine, and Yuna never missed a chance to remind me of that. "Thank you for the invitation, Yuna, but I'm happy where I am," I replied. "I finally have a home of my own." "But you can't live alone," she sounded desperate. "At your age, with no family support, what if you get sick? Who will take care of you?" "I have the means to hire a nurse if I need one," I countered calmly. "But so far, I feel fine. Even the arthritis is less bothersome. The sea air must be helping. Please, Irene." Her voice became even more pleading. "Let's at least meet. We can talk. I'll come to your place, or you come to ours. Or a neutral place if you like. Fielding will be so happy to see you." "Where is Fielding now?" I asked. "Why didn't he call?" "He's at work," Yuna answered quickly. "I'll call him right away and tell him I found you. He'll be overjoyed." I doubted it, but I thought I'd give it a chance. "All right, have Fielding call me when he can," I said. "You have my number." Of course," Yuna exclaimed with unnatural enthusiasm. "He'll call today, I promise. And, Irene, I'm so glad you're all right. It's a real miracle." "Yes, Yuna, it really is a miracle," I agreed. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. the satisfaction of being able to show Yuna my new life, and the bitterness of realizing that her sudden concern was due solely to the news of my financial situation. All day I waited for a call from Fielding, but the phone was silent. It was only in the evening, when I was about to go to bed, that he finally called. "Grandma?" His voice sounded uncertain, as if he was afraid I wouldn't answer. "Hello, Fielding," I said neutrally, trying not to sound either happy that he'd called or resentful of the month of silence. "Oh my God, Grandma, it's really you." He sounded relieved. "I was so worried. Where have you been all this time? Why didn't you call? Why didn't you look for me?" I asked bluntly. There was a pause. "Yeah, I did," he said uncertainly. "Yuna and I called every hospital, every motel in the area." "But you didn't think to call Darla?" I asked. "Or my other colleagues at the post office? Or the corner store where I bought lottery tickets every week?" Silence again, then a quiet sigh. "It's my fault, Grandma. Yeah, I don't know what came over me that day. Yuna was so insistent, and uh, I was just tired of arguing all the time. But as soon as you left, I realized what a terrible mistake I'd made. And yet you didn't follow me," I pointed out. "Didn't try to stop me, didn't really look for me." "I know." His voice trembled. "There's no forgiveness for me, but I swear I realized my mistake. I broke up with Yuna that same night. We almost got divorced. I doubted the truth of those words. Yuna had probably told him to say those things to make me feel bad." "Fielding," I interrupted him. "As you can see, I'm fine. More than all right. I've won the lottery, bought a house, started a new life." "Yeah, Yuna told me," he said, a note of excitement in his voice. "That's amazing, Grandma. You always said you'd get lucky one day, and now you have. I'm so happy for you." "Thank you," I said dryly. "Listen, Grandma," he continued, "I realize you're hurt, and you have every right to be. But maybe we could meet, talk in person. I miss you so much." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to see my grandson, to hold him, to hear him laugh, but another part of me was afraid of being disappointed to discover that his sudden remorse was only due to news of my wealth. "Okay," I finally agreed. "We can meet, but just you and me, without Yuna." "Sure, whatever you say," he agreed hastily. "Where would you like to meet? I can come to your place, or can we meet somewhere in the city?" "There's a good cafe near my house," I said. Sea breeze. "Would 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon suit you?" "Yes, perfect." His voice sounded almost happy. "I'll be there." "Thanks, Grandma." "Yeah, I really want to see you." "See you tomorrow, Fielding," I said, and hung up. The morning was foggy and cool, atypical for La Jolla this time of year. A white haze enveloped the coast, softening the outline of the houses and trees. The ocean merged with the sky, and my house seemed to float somewhere between the land and the clouds. I sat on the terrace with a cup of tea, watching the mist slowly dissipate, revealing more and more details of the landscape. It was at times like this that I felt especially clear how much my life had changed. A month ago, I'd woken up in a cramped room, anxiously thinking about the day ahead, the inevitable confrontations with Yuna, the need to constantly justify my existence. Now, however, every morning began with peace and freedom. The meeting with Fielding, scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, made me nervous. After our phone conversation, I couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about what I would say to him. I loved my grandson, but his behavior the day I was kicked out of the house hurt me deeper than all of Yuna's words and actions. I never expected anything good from her, but from Fielding, from the boy I'd raised after his parents died, who'd promised to always take care of me. The betrayal on his part was especially bitter. I decided to be honest with him, to say everything I felt, not softening the blow, but not trying to punish either. At my age, it's not worth wasting time with resentment and innuendo. Life is too short for that. By noon, the fog had cleared completely, and the day was clear and warm. I changed into a light dress of natural sea silk, one of my new acquisitions that I was particularly fond of. I added simple pearl earrings, a thin bracelet, and a small starfish brooch I'd bought at a local art gallery. My new look was elegant but not flashy, emphasizing dignity but not flaunting wealth. The Sea Breeze Cafe was a 10-minute walk from my house. I decided to take a walk, enjoying the warm day and the fresh sea air. On the way, I thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought me here. Getting fired from the post office, the conflict with Una, winning the lottery. If any of those things hadn't happened, I'd still be living in El Cajon, in constant tension and fear of losing the roof over my head. Fielding was already waiting for me at the entrance to the cafe. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot and glancing at his watch. When he saw me, he brightened and waved. For a moment, I saw in him the boy I'd once met at school, open, loving, sincere. But immediately I reminded myself that that boy had grown up long ago and turned into a man who let his wife kick his own grandmother out of the house. "Grandma," he hurried towards me. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Fielding." I let him hug me, but I remained reserved. "You look good, too." It was a lie. Up close, I could see that he was slimmer, with shadows under his eyes and tense creases at the corners of his lips. Fielding looked exhausted and years older. We took a table on the terrace of the cafe. It was a quiet day, with few customers, and we could talk without fear of being overheard. "I ordered you your favorite tea," Fielding said as we sat down. "Earl Grey with milk and 1 spoonful of sugar, right?" I nodded, touched that he remembered such small things. "How are you, Grandma?" he asked when the waiter brought our order. "Aren't you settling in well?" "Yes, Fielding." I sipped my tea. "I like my new house. I like the neighborhood. I like my new life. I'm happy for you." He smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "You deserve the best, especially after the way we treated you." I was silent, waiting for him to continue. "Grandma, I don't know how to express how sorry I am." He lowered his eyes. "What happened that day? I can't forgive myself for not standing up for you, for not stopping Una." "Why didn't you?" I asked bluntly. Fielding sighed. "Yeah, I don't know. I was weak, always been that way, letting other people make decisions for me. First my parents, then you and Grandpa, now Una. You were a child when you lived with us," I said. "But you're a grown man now, Fielding, a husband, perhaps soon to be a father. You can't keep going with the flow." "I know," he looked up at me. "That's what I've been thinking about all this time, that I've become spineless, a man with no opinion, no willpower. What are you going to do about it?" I asked him. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I do know that I want to change. I want to become a man you could be proud of again." His words touched me, but I couldn't let myself believe him so easily again. "Fielding, I've loved you from the moment I held you in my arms in the hospital," I said softly, "and I'll love you until my last breath. But pride has to be earned through deeds, not words." He nodded, accepting my words. "I understand, and I'll do anything to earn your respect again, starting with not asking you for money like I was going to yesterday." Una insisted. "But, I can't. Not after all we've done to you." I was surprised by his frankness. Perhaps something was changing for the better in him after all. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "It's a good start." We continued talking, discussing his work, my new house, the books we'd been reading lately, the usual safe topics that helped us gradually return to a more casual conversation. I noticed that he avoided mentioning Una, as if he was afraid of spoiling our meeting. As we finished our tea, Fielding suddenly said, "Grandma, I want you to come back to us. Not for good, of course," he added hastily, seeing my expression. "Just for a visit, to make sure you're all right." Yuna's worried sick. I held up my hand to stop him. "Fielding, I'm not coming back to your house. Not for a visit, let alone to live." "Why not?" He seemed genuinely upset. "We can fix this. We can start again." "No, Fielding." I shook my head. "Some things can't be undone. Some words can't be taken back." When Yuna said, "There's no living here without money," she was just expressing what she'd been feeling for a long time. And when you remained silent, you tacitly agreed with her. "I was wrong." His voice trembled. "I regret it every day." "I believe you regret it," I said softly. "But regret doesn't change the past, and it doesn't guarantee you won't do the same thing in the future." I paused. "Besides, I'm happy where I am now. I finally have my own home, my own rules, my own life. I don't want to go back to being a free housekeeper and an ATM." "You were never an ATM for us," he exclaimed. "For you, maybe not," I agreed. "But for Yuna, let's be honest, Fielding. She only tolerated me in the house because of the money I contributed to the family budget. And now that she'd heard about my winnings, she suddenly remembered how important I was to the family." Fielding couldn't argue with that. We both knew I was right. "I love you, grandson," I continued. "I always will. We can see each other, talk, spend time together. But I'm not coming back to your house, and I won't let Yuna manipulate me or you again." He looked defeated but nodded, accepting my decision. "I understand, and I respect your choice. Just don't disappear again, okay? I don't want to lose you." "You won't." I reached out and squeezed his palm. "I promise." When we said goodbye at the cafe, Fielding hugged me tighter than usual, as if he was afraid to let me go. "I love you, Grandma," he whispered. "I love you too," I said. "And I believe that you will find the strength to become the man you want to be." When I got home, I felt strangely light. Talking to Fielding had lifted a weight from my heart. I hadn't forgiven him completely, but I'd taken a step in that direction, and, more importantly, I made my boundaries and intentions clear. I spent the rest of the day working in the garden. Ernesto taught me how to properly prune the roses, and I enjoyed this simple, meditative activity. The sun was slowly slipping toward sunset, coloring the sky and ocean in shades of pink and gold. I was just about to head back to the house when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Peeking out from behind the hedge, I saw a white Mercedes parked in front of my house. Yuna came out of the car, elegant as ever, wearing a light-colored suit and a large box in her hands, tied with a lush bow. My heart twitched. I hadn't expected to see her here, especially so soon after meeting Fielding. Apparently, he'd told her about our conversation, and she'd decided to take matters into her own hands. Yuna climbed the porch steps and rang the doorbell. I could have pretended I wasn't home, but that would have been cowardly. Instead, I took off my gardening gloves, shook my dress off the ground, and went to open it. "Irene!" Yuna exclaimed with fake joy when I opened the door. "How glad I am to see you." "Hello, Yuna." I didn't invite her in, but stood in the doorway. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? Her smile faded slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "I just wanted to visit you, to make sure you were doing well," she said, "and I brought you a little gift as a token of reconciliation." She handed me a box. From the logo on the package, it was an expensive cosmetic from the spa where she worked. "Thank you, but it's not necessary." I didn't take the box. "As you can see, I'm doing just fine." "Yeah, your house is amazing." She glanced at the facade, not hiding her admiration and envy. "It's so spacious, and the view of the ocean. You were so lucky to invest your winnings. Thank you. I remained polite but cold. May I come in? She asked, seeing that I was in no hurry to move away from the door. I'd like to see how you've settled in. I hesitated. On the one hand, I didn't want to let this woman into my house, my sanctuary. On the other hand, there was something appealing about showing her that I'd accomplished everything on my own, without their help. All right, I said at last, stepping aside. Come on in. Una walked in, looking around with undisguised curiosity. Her eyes widened at the sight of the spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean, the antique furniture, the artwork on the walls. It's impressive, she said, trying to hide her envy behind the compliment. You must have spent a fortune on the furnishings. Not as much as you'd think, I replied. Most of the furniture came from the previous owners. They were moving to Florida and didn't want to take it all with them. Lucky, I could hear the bitterness in her voice. You've been very lucky lately. Yeah, lucky, I agreed calmly, though some might say I deserve some luck after all I've been through. Una pretended not to notice the stiletto. Irene, I didn't just come to bring a gift, she said, getting to the point. I came to apologize. What happened between us? It was awful, unforgivable. I behaved undignified. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Una had clearly rehearsed this speech, and I wanted to hear the whole thing. Stress, financial problems, work problems, none of that is an excuse, she continued. I've been cruel to you, and I'm deeply ashamed of it. She paused dramatically. Please forgive me. Give us a chance to make things right. I looked at this woman who had kicked me out of the house on a rainy day, who had packed my things and stacked them by the door, who had said, no accommodation without money, and now she was standing in my house, feigning remorse because she had learned of my winnings. Una, I said calmly, I appreciate you coming, but we both know you're not here out of remorse. You're here for the money. Her face froze. How can you say that? I'm really sorry for what happened. Maybe, I shrugged, but you're only sorry because you found out about my winnings. If I'd stayed a poor old woman, you wouldn't have come to apologize. That's not fair, she said, but there was guilt in her eyes. I was really worried about you the whole time. You have? I raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't you and Fielding really look for me? Didn't call my friends, my co-workers? Didn't go to the police? We called hospitals, shelters, she started. Don't lie right now, I interrupted her. It's not dignified. Una was silent, realizing that her bluff had been blown. Okay, she finally said, changing tactics. Yes, I'm here partly for the money, but not because I want to get it out of you. It's because I realized how wrong I've been about you all this time. I thought you were a liability, and you've turned out to be, a valuable member of the family. A valuable member of the family, I repeated ironically. And that value is measured in dollars, isn't it? No, it's not. Dash, she exclaimed. It's not just about money. Fielding misses you so much. He hasn't been the same since you left. He's withdrawn. He hardly speaks to me. I saw him today, I said, and I'll see him again. But I'm not coming back to your house, Una. Never. Her face contorted with annoyance. Why are you so stubborn? We can make things right. A clean slate. Some things can't be undone, I replied. Some things you can't take back. When you kicked me out the door, you changed our relationship forever. But I apologized. She sounded hysterical. What more do you want? Nothing, I said simply. I don't want anything from you, Una. No apologies, no gifts, no relationship. I have everything I need now. It's the money, isn't it? Her tone became accusatory. You think you're better off than us because you won the lottery? You think money makes you special? I smiled. marveling at her blindness. You know, Una, I said quietly, real poverty is not the absence of money, but the absence of a soul, and your house is the poorest place I've ever lived in. Her face went pale, as if I'd hit her. She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a word. Now please go away. I pointed to the door. I have much to do in the garden. You'll regret this, she finally said. When you're alone, with no family, no support. I'm not alone, I interrupted her. I have friends, neighbors, new acquaintances, and Fielding, if he really wants to be a part of my life. But you have no place in it. I opened the front door, letting her know the conversation was over. Una gave me a look of fury and humiliation, grabbed her gift box, and walked out, stamping her footsteps. At the car, she turned around, as if she wanted to say something else, but changed her mind. As she got behind the wheel, the tires squealed and she started off. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, triumph, loneliness. Through the window, I watched the sun set into the ocean, coloring the water in shades of gold and purple. A new day was ending, and with it, a whole chapter of my life was ending. I didn't know what the future would bring. Perhaps Fielding would indeed find the strength to change, to become his own man. Maybe we'd rebuild our relationship, regain the closeness we used to have. Or maybe he'll stay under Una's thumb, and our interactions will be reduced to the occasional awkward holiday get-together. But no matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I would never again let anyone treat me the way Una did. I would never let myself feel like a burden, an intruder, a second-class citizen. At 67, I finally had what I had been looking for all my life, not just a roof over my head or financial security, but inner freedom and dignity. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. I stepped away from the door and headed for the kitchen. I made fresh tea, took a cup, and stepped out onto the terrace. The evening breeze caressed my face, bringing with it the smell of salt and blooming roses. I took a sip of tea and smiled.